Good afternoon. Getting right down to business here. We are doing it live, doing more at 4 weekday afternoons. Live on the air, 790 KBC. Mottek On Money, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com. And your on-demand Mottek On Money podcast, kbc.com, Apple iTunes, YouTube, all your favorite podcast platforms. Liberation Day approaching tomorrow, the day President Trump is expected to give us a tariff update. The markets have been nervous, and today we saw another seesaw session. Stocks finished mostly higher today after another volatile day on Wall Street. Investors taking in the latest reports on the economy and await the announcement by President Trump, which is set for tomorrow afternoon. The Dow came in for a closing loss of 12 points, had been down more than 100 early on. The S&P 500 closing higher by 21 points, and the NASDAQ moving up 151 points. We did get the latest reading on the manufacturing sector today for the month of March, showing manufacturers appear to have fallen back into a slump, facing rising prices and lower demand because of uncertainty over tariffs on metals and pending tariffs on other foreign products. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, meanwhile, reported 7.6 million job openings in the month of February. That was a slight drop from the previous month. Weakness in the economy starting to get more noticeable, according to the Fed's latest forecast. The Atlanta Federal Reserve's GDP Now forecast coming out today for the first quarter just cut to a worrisome negative 1.4% annual rate, down from a negative 0.5% reading they came out with late last week. Much of the weakness, according to MarketWatch, in that report is tied to the surge of imports ahead of the new White House tariffs. Imports are subtracted from growth. Other signs, though, weakness in the domestic economy. The Fed's forecast of first quarter final sales to private domestic buyers, another important measure of demand that takes out the trade sector, has been cut to just 0.4% increase from 1.5% previously. Looking ahead, President Trump expected to reveal the latest tariff plan after the stock market closing bell tomorrow, which is 1 o'clock our time here on the West Coast, 4 p.m. Eastern. The president calls tomorrow Liberation Day. All this happening a day after stocks entered the month of March, and the first quarter of 2025 lower, dragged down largely by uncertainty over the president's tariffs plans. The Dow was down 4.2% for the month of March, down 1.3% for the first quarter. The S&P 500 slid 5.8% last month and gave back 4.6% for the quarter, its largest quarterly percentage drop since the third quarter of 2022. And the tech-heavy NASDAQ slid 8.2% for the month of March and 10.4% for the first quarter. Also, the small-cap Russell 2K index is moving into bear market territory, it looks like. That is a finish below 20% or more below its most recent high. China, meanwhile, bracing for President Trump's tariff announcements, too, as tensions rise again between the U.S. and China. China's conducting military drills around Taiwan. Russia is warning against the U.S. strike on Iran nuclear sites. I'll discuss the latest geopolitical hotspots this afternoon with Gordon Chang, Gatestone Institute Senior Fellow, author of numerous books, including his latest, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. He's also on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Gordon G. Chang. And with billions spent on L.A. County homeless services and the results not coming fast enough, government spending on the homeless crisis here in L.A. getting new scrutiny. And this afternoon, the Board of Supervisors set to vote on a plan to consolidate homeless services into one county department. A lot of drama associated with this. If this motion does pass, the new county department would start operating on July 1st. This after an audit ordered by a federal judge on homeless spending found a lack of data and financial systems used to keep track of homeless programs run by the government, causing waste. I'll discuss the very latest with the Honorable Dennis ZINE, former Los Angeles City Council member, retired LAPD sergeant with something like 56 years of service to the City of Angels. The Honorable Dennis ZINE will be on the line live with us later this hour as we watch the latest news coming out of the Hahn Hall of Administration there in downtown L.A. But first, on your money, the markets, the economy, the whole works now. Joining us live, Gabriel Wisdom, Managing Director of American Money Management, based right here in Southern California, also author of Wisdom on Value Investing. Gabriel Wisdom, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, Frank. You know, with Liberation, or the Turf Liberation Day approaching tomorrow, some, and I would say a majority of investors are wondering if they're going to be liberated from their money. The political fallout is beginning to show in the polling data. according to a CBS survey that I saw, YouGov CBS, 42% of Americans say they're worse off financially, a significant rise from January when it was only 28% in that survey that felt that way. And this is one of the problems, is that consumers tend to pull back when there's so much uncertainty. Consumers could stop buying, and then we have a vicious cycle. But, Frank, there's a number of economic and political disconnects that do leave open the possibility that the markets and sentiment are overpricing the risks. There's rising levels of panic. We're seeing it in the volatility indexes. The disconnects, for example, are despite all the elevated volatility, there's very strong markets in China, in Mexico, in Europe, and Canada. Those stock markets have been doing very, very well. So somewhat puzzling, certainly a disconnect. It's an interesting time.
Very much so. In the meantime, gold kissing record highs this week. Right now, still hovering at or near its all-time high here at $3,148 and change. Bitcoin, we saw a rebound today as well, up above 85,000 after taking some hits in the last couple of days. What do you make of this big move this continuing move in gold to record highs and the wild moves we've seen lately in the crypto space?
Well, the gold has gone through very long cycles of consolidation where it just moved, hardly at all, or it was range bound, and it's been breaking up because governments and individuals now are concerned about deficits, trading deficits, and debt levels of respective governments that they're in or that they control. And so the demand for physical gold, certainly in modern times, it's never been greater. Gold is up over 20% year to date. With regard to Bitcoin, I think it's tied somewhat to the total amount of money available in savings accounts. We call this M2, and M2 is now higher. It's growing almost daily, and that implies an upward trajectory for crypto if history is any guide. Should be better for Bitcoin in particular.
On there live with money manager Gabriel Wisdom. What about, given this tremendous uncertainty, that's the word we hear every few minutes now, any rethinking of the traditional 60-40 stock market bond mix? I see one of the major advisors has proposed making some adjustments for alternative investments, giving crypto some consideration.
Yes, I think you're referring to Larry Fink, who's the CEO of the largest money management firm in the world, BlackRock. And Larry Fink is a proponent of Bitcoin and alternative investments. And the reason for it is, and it makes good sense, when you buy or sell stocks in the open market, you're not helping or hurting the companies that you're buying or selling. For example, Tesla has been selling off because some investors just refuse to own Tesla. I'm not going to support, Elon Musk, blah, 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 and I'm going to sell my Tesla. Well, that doesn't mean much to Elon Musk unless he's going to sell more Tesla shares, and he certainly doesn't need to. Where you make a difference in the world is in the private sector, private placements, and that's what Larry Fink and BlackRock are advocating. For example, he was talking about a $68 trillion investment boom in infrastructure by 2040. The global demand for new infrastructure, and we're talking about the highway system, transcontinental railroad, and so forth, upgrading that by 2040, around the corner. That investment's expected to be $68 trillion, and I mean that's just remarkable. And so alternative investments are likely to get a lift here, I think.
On there live with money manager Gabriel Wisdom. Looks like Johnson & Johnson took a hit today on some news, down, about 7.5% here, down more than $12 to $153 and change. What happened to that big company?
Well, companies have softened quarters from time to time. They have inventory building up. Johnson & Johnson has been one of those stocks that didn't participate in the big rallies of the last couple of years. It's actually been a pretty interesting value stock, but there are concerns that consumers are pulling back. This is a consumer staple company, and if households plan to cut back their spending on both essentials and discretionary items because there's some sort of tariff-driven inflation, that hurts the Johnson & Johnsons and the consumer staples.
Very interesting. You mentioned Tesla earlier. We see a rebound in Tesla today at more than $9 at $268 and change. That's one of the stocks that took a hit, certainly in the first quarter of this year. What about Tesla here, and what are your impressions of the haircuts that were taken in the first quarter?
Well, I think it's unwarranted. Fundamentally, not that the stock's been cheap. It hasn't been cheap for a very long time. But the prospects for future growth with Tesla are fairly good as long as Elon Musk doesn't attract too much controversy. The two biggest EV markets in the European Union, Germany and the European Union, France, have rejected Tesla automobiles. They're looking at, and consumers are buying other EVs. So that doesn't bode well in the short run for Tesla, and we're seeing it reflected in the shares. Not today, but the trend is definitely down. The stock has fallen almost 50%.
Yeah, and I think those sales numbers have fallen too that you referenced, certainly in France and other parts of Europe. That is definitely a consideration there. Among the other Mag 7 names, NVIDIA, of course, also had a rough first quarter, rebounding slightly today, up $1.77 at 110 and change. Apple, slightly higher today at 223. What are your thoughts here of the Mag 7 names here for the rest of the year?
Well, Frank, it's clear that those seven companies, the Magnificent Seven, are no longer leading the market. Nearly half of the companies in the S&P 500 are outperforming the Magnificent Seven, and some are outperforming the index, and there are sectors that are doing rather well, despite the tariff jitters. One analyst, Ed Yardeni, said this is Trump's reign of tariffs because there's so much uncertainty and fear. It's hard to make a best case, a worst case scenario. You don't know what the scenario is. Hopefully, he'll unveil something that's easy to follow tomorrow when we get some direction. But with regard to NVIDIA, there's so many new disruptive technologies coming along that I think that's put pressure on NVIDIA. For example, the big guys are all elbowing into quantum computing and quantum chips. I know NVIDIA is doing the same, but it's got more competition than ever before.
All right, certainly the auto names have been nervous lately. A lot riding, if you don't pardon the expression, on what's going to happen tomorrow. So we saw Ford slipping a bit today. Looks like GM up slightly. What about the car names here, and what do you think is going to happen tomorrow as far as the auto names are concerned?
I'm not sure. The auto industry is one of the most influential in the United States, and certainly the world, along with housing. So, these tariff developments have very practical implications. Over half of auto parts are sourced from abroad, and so tariffs could have a major impact here, and that's a problem. So. I wouldn't go into the auto stocks just yet. I want to wait to see. I want more clarity, like we all want.
At this point, Gabriel Wisdom, let me ask you the big question here. With uncertainty all over the place, any specific places where you are putting money now and/or taking it off the table?
Well, Frank, not every sector is getting pummeled by the tariff route. And Coca-Cola, for example, which had participated in the wonderful stock markets for the last couple of years, has had a great year to date. PepsiCo is another one, Procter and Gamble. You mentioned Johnson & Johnson had a rough day and a difficult report, but I mean, over the long run, these consumer staples look pretty good. They tend to be recession resistant. And then there's Amgen and Merck. These are looking interesting to me. And the utilities in general, because of the build out of data centers, the AI data center investments that are coming from companies like Apple, Taiwan Semiconductor, TSMC, Eli Lilly, and others, it's significant. I mean, I'm talking over $1 trillion in investments in AI data centers. That benefits a number of the electric utilities.
Very interesting. And what about the utility names? That they seem to have held up pretty well, generally speaking, in this environment. A lot of the analysts on this program have been recommending utilities. What are your thoughts about utilities overall?
Well, I think if you were going to consider owning utilities, and you don't, you're trying to do it yourself, you could own an exchange-traded fund that has Duke Energy, for example, symbol DUK, and Constellation Energy, CEG. These are companies that, I mean, they're some of the best, and they're in a number of different alternative energies as well. The symbol for that exchange-traded fund is XLU.
Anything else you'd like to mention? Certainly precious metals getting a lot of attention these days, particularly gold hitting record highs, silver hitting highs we haven't seen in at least a dozen years, but still well off its all-time high. Platinum still hovering at around 1,000. Any thoughts about, and copper, by the way, also, of course, been in the spotlight lately. Any thoughts specifically about the metals complex?
Frank, I mentioned the data centers. They rely on metals. Copper, for example, if you're wondering if we're going to have a recession, you just look at, as you've said before, Dr. Copper, the one metal that has a degree in economics. In recessionary times, it trades at around $2.50.
The Sean Ryan Show presents Peak Points. Get timeless inspiration from the very best of The Sean Ryan Show.
September 11th happens. What is the first thing that went through your head?
September 12th, I'm going back in the military.
Talk about being recruited by the cartel. How do you cope? Just learning how to find a new normal.
One of the most tragic events in American firefighter history.
You know what comes after.
You have this beautiful life. You have these horrible experiences, yes, but you can do something with them for the greater good.
The Sean Ryan Show Peak Points. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
It's trading above $5 now. Copper is telling us that the economy is stronger than we think. There's a reason why the Federal Reserve hasn't budged on interest rates, and I wouldn't be surprised if they even were to ratchet a tiny bit higher, though I'm not predicting it. But we're building out these green data centers now. Green energy sources are receiving considerable investment from AI providers, and in order to build these things, you're going to need all those metals, or most of them. So I like them.
All right, we'll be staying tuned here tomorrow on Liberation Day. Hopefully not liberation of any more funds out of anyone's wallet. So we're expecting that announcement right after the closing bell tomorrow afternoon back east. So thank you very much, Gabriel Wisdom, for those insights as always. That is Gabriel Wisdom, money manager and Managing Director of American Money Management, which happens to be based here in Southern California. Also author of Wisdom on Value Investing, live with us here on Mottek On Money, 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues, 790 KABC. Good afternoon. Mixed finish to the day on Wall Street ahead of Liberation Day, as President Trump calls it, the tariff announcements that will be coming after the closing bell on Wall Street tomorrow. The Dow coming in for a closing loss of 12 points, well off its worst level of the day. It was down more than 100 early on. The S&P 500 up 21, and the Nasdaq up 151 points. This after a rough first quarter of 2025 closed out with losses across the board for the major stock market averages. The yield on the 10-year note is back down to 4.18%. Looks like gold still at or near its record high today at $3,148.50 an ounce, down $1.80 here at the moment. Silver of 7 cents at $34.38 an ounce. In the cryptos, we see a wild ride for Bitcoin once again, moving mostly higher today, though, up about 300 at the moment at 85,240. Ethereum pulling back slightly at 1,910. and Doge at the moment at 17 cents. The VIX index, the volatility index, the Wall Street so-called fear index, pulling back 2%. Johnson & Johnson shares among the casualties of the day, down more than $12 at $153 and change, a drop of 7.5%. Apple stock moving up $1.06 at $223 and change. Tesla on the rebound today up $9.30 at $268.46. Nvidia shares up $1.77 at $110.15. And now the latest news for you here on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KABC. Looks like stock futures are moving higher as Wall Street gets set for the expected rollout of President Trump's tariffs tomorrow. The announcement expected right after the closing bell on Wall Street back east, which is 4 o'clock their time. Will be 1 p.m. out here on the West Coast. Now, the move coming ahead of the implementation of President Trump's reciprocal tariffs that will start with all countries, in his words. The White House revealed today that the tariffs will be effective immediately. The Treasury Secretary telling lawmakers today on Capitol Hill that the tariffs announced tomorrow will essentially serve as a cap, where the tariffs that are announced will be the highest amount set. According to the Washington Post, which cited 3 sources familiar with the situation, the Trump administration is also considering imposing tariffs of roughly 20% on most imports coming into the country. But that report said that advisors caution that several options are still on the table. That's the very latest coming across the wires. Meanwhile, China is bracing for President Trump's tariff announcements as tensions rise again between the U.S. and China. China is also conducting military drills around Taiwan. And Russia is warning against a U.S. strike on Iranian nuclear sites. Let's bring in Gordon Chang, Gatestone Institute Senior Fellow, author of numerous books, including his latest, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. On X, formerly known as Twitter, he's at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon Chang, thank you very much for taking the call here at this very interesting time here on the eve of the big tariff announcement. Give us your impressions of what's happening.
Well, President Trump is going to change the world's trade system, and it's going to be a radical revision. The United States is going to go back on its trade agreements, including USMCA, our North American trade agreement with Canada and Mexico, but so are other countries. And this is occurring at a time where there's rapid deglobalization. So the country that adapts fastest is going to prosper, and I think that's going to be the U.S.
Certainly the president planning to use tariffs as a tool to crack down on China's fentanyl trade and so forth. How's this working so far based on what you're seeing, based on your best information covering China as closely as you do?
Well, President Trump's 2 rounds of 10% tariffs for fentanyl are just recent, and so we haven't seen the effect on the fentanyl trade. But we got to remember that Xi Jinping promised to President Biden in 2023, President Trump in 2018, and President Obama in 2016 to substantially reduce the flow of fentanyl, and that didn't occur to any of those times. So I don't think the Trump tariffs are going to have that much effect. If they're higher, then that's a different story. But at least for the present moment, we haven't seen a reduction in fentanyl flow.
Is there nervousness in China over tomorrow's announcement? The expectation of additional tariffs, possibly reciprocal tariffs, and with the Chinese economy in trouble, as you've told us here, what do you think's going on over there?
When we look at the Chinese propaganda, we can see that there is apprehension, and as you'd expect, because Xi Jinping does not want to make consumption the basis of his economy, which means his only exit out of a terrible situation right now is to export more. And that means he needs to export more to the United States, the world's biggest market, a market that he cannot replace in the short or even in the intermediate future. So, yes, China right now is very, very concerned about what President Trump's going to do tomorrow.
And also putting pressure on Russia and Iran, it looks like. I know you follow all geopolitical developments very, very closely. Russia now warning against a U.S. strike on Iranian nuclear sites as the U.S., according to various reports, moves bombers closer to that region. What are your impressions of these latest developments?
Well, clearly Russia wants to intimidate the U.S. into not striking Iran, and Russia's threat of catastrophic consequences, quote unquote, that's a threat to use nuclear weapons. remember that Vladimir Putin, before the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, preceded it with a number of threats to use his nukes. And then it actually worked because the United States and other friends of Ukraine didn't come to Ukraine's aid to the extent you would have thought. And so Putin said, well, it worked once, so he's going to try it again. I don't think it's going to work on President Trump because President Trump has a very different outlook on the world than Biden did. And I think we're going to see a very different outcome in a month or two.
Looks like the pieces on the chessboard are being moved around here. What do you see as the next shoe possibly dropping around the world?
It could be anywhere, Frank, because we've seen problems in North Africa, of course, with the enhanced problems around Iran, the exercises around Taiwan, Chinese ships in Philippine waters, Chinese ships in Japanese waters, Chinese ships in Australian waters. This is a very dangerous situation because it looks like China is just lashing out in all directions.
Let's talk about Taiwan for just a moment. I know you've been following the latest military moves there. The report that China is holding military drills around Taiwan and making some nasty comments about the Taiwanese leader. What are we to make of these latest developments?
The exercises that are currently going on have not, there's no announced end date, which is really interesting because usually China announces how long these exercises will take place. You know, many people are saying that these are no longer exercises. These are rehearsals for war. I think that China is just trying to intimidate because I don't think it's ready to go to war by launching an invasion of the main island of Taiwan. But nonetheless, you know, everyone needs to be concerned. And I think the United States needs to push back rhetorically right now because these exercises are more provocative than we have seen recently.
Meanwhile, it's reported that Taiwan has activated its military in response to these Chinese drills. I believe under the first Trump administration, Taiwan received some pretty good American equipment too. What do you see ahead for Taiwan under President Trump?
Well, when Secretary of Defense Hegseth toured the region, he made some comments supportive of Taiwan, took a number of people by surprise, including Taiwan's officials, how strong the comments were. And that's a good thing. And I think that what we're going to see is President Trump generally take the attitude towards China, an invasion of Taiwan, not on my watch. So I think that we'll probably be okay. But it's going to be difficult because the Chinese right now can take us by surprise.
And these exercises we're talking about, as you noted, just days after the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth concluded his first official visit to Asia, right, as Defense Secretary. What about the timing of these maneuvers?
Yeah, they are 2 days after Hegseth left the region. Clearly, I think the Chinese wanted to show the region that the United States was not able to sustain its presence. I think the Chinese are wrong. But that's the message that Beijing is trying to convey. Right now, though, countries in the region are extremely concerned about what China is doing. And so they're banding together much more closely. And that's a good sign because it means that we can deter China if we all act together in a united fashion.
Given these military moves, certainly it's a nervous time once again in Taiwan. I believe there was a recent survey taken there that people there still believe that an invasion could come. What is your expectation here on what China might do with Taiwan?
Bravo TV star Lala Kent holds nothing back on the Give Them Lala podcast.
It's very a lot.
You want the headline.
Here is my interview with Vicky Gunvalson. Who did the biggest number on you?
I'm not friends with Tamara anymore, which is fine.
Do you feel like you guys can repair?
No.
Stick to what you know.
Iconic.
Ooh. Absolutely fantastic. It is like the Super Bowl every episode.
Give Them Lala.
Unhinged, but also amazing TV.
Get ready.
Follow and listen on your favorite platform.
I think that China's going to huff and puff. I don't see China starting an invasion or starting hostilities with an invasion of the main island of Taiwan. But that's not to say that Taiwan is safe, because if a provocation that China starts someplace, let's say in the Philippines, if China can't control it, and I don't think they can, then we will see the whole East Asia region enveloped in war. So the war may not start in Taiwan, but it could very well end up on Taiwan's shores just because of the way things will spread so fast.
And we've seen NATO ships around that region in recent times, right? That we've talked about on some occasions. Certainly, the potential for a flashpoint involving NATO there is great, right?
Yes, I mean we've seen Canada, we've seen Germany, the Netherlands contribute ships to peacekeeping operations and freedom of navigation operations in that region. And that's a good thing because it shows that the great democracies of the world are united. But NATO has a lot of problems of its own right now because Putin is pushing forward, not just in Ukraine, but also creating provocations elsewhere in Europe. So NATO is going to be fully committed.
We'll add that to the uncertainty tally. Gordon Chang, thank you very much for your always thoughtful assessment of things here. That is Gordon Chang, Gatestone Institute Senior Fellow, author of numerous books. His latest, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. And be sure to follow him on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon Chang, thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thank you, Frank.
Out to the freeways we go now, live on 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here, 790 KABC. Some breaking news from the Han Hall administration in downtown Los Angeles. L.A. County will stop sending hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer money each year to the agency that has been charged with serving the homeless here in Los Angeles. On a 4-0 vote just a short time ago, the L.A. County Board of Supervisors put in a motion to plan to take away more than $300 million a year in taxpayer funding from the L.A. Homeless Services Authority, known as LAHSA, by the middle of next year. Instead, those funds will shift to the county's direct oversight and control. Now, this after a scathing rebuke recently by a federal judge and a series of harsh audits. The rebuke of the job LAHSA has done over recent years at managing and tracking government spending for homelessness, including an inability to properly account for billions in taxpayer dollars. Joining us live now on this breaking story, we have the Honorable Dennis ZINE, former Los Angeles City Council member and retired LAPD sergeant with about 56 years of service to the City of Angels. Dennis ZINE is on the line with this breaking news. Give us your reaction to the news out of the supervisor's office just a few moments ago.
Frank, how many, not millions, but how many billions of dollars, taxpayers' dollars, do they have to throw away before they wake up and realize it's not working? Travel around Los Angeles County, homeless. And the money that's gone into this, not millions, but billions upon billions of dollars. The county has woken up. I understand the city is still sleeping. The city still wants to maintain the program with LAHSA. It is a ripoff of the taxpayers. And we know that today, sales tax increased because the voters approved another measure to throw more billions of dollars on a program that's not working. There are people making money on these programs, but the taxpayers are losing the quality of life and the dollars that are invested to try and eradicate a program that is not going away. I've been involved in every single homeless count. Those are a joke. They spend millions of dollars doing the homeless counts. This is just a total, complete ripoff of the taxpayers. And I ask the listeners, what happens when you see a homeless person and the homeless person and the homeless person? Nothing happens. They're there. They're not going away. So the county has finally woken up. Judge Carter, I'm surprised he hasn't put people in jail, elected officials in jail, because they're not answering his questions. He wants to get to the bottom. This has been going on for so long. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled you can't be homeless. You can't be on the street. Something has to take place. But they keep kicking the bottle down the wall, down the wall, down the hall, down the wall. And here we find out the county is now saying, whoa, we're going to start a new agency. How much is that going to cost? Meanwhile, the taxpayers of this region are suffering the consequences of this population of homeless. And whether it's mental or it's drugs or whatever the case may be, it's destroying the quality of life for so many people, the 10 million people in Los Angeles County. It's really a shame to see this happening. I think you're going to see a fight going between the city and the county, where the city wants to maintain LAHSA and the county says we've had enough, along with Judge Carter. I can get on my soapbox and go on for hours, but people just wake up. Quit voting for more tax dollars that funds programs where we see no positive impact. It's really outrageous. As of today, you're going to pay higher tax on a purchase, a higher tax in LA County, and then if you live in the Lancaster Palmdale, it's going to be 11.25% tax. It's going to go higher. So wake up. Understand the politicians aren't helping you, helping your family, helping the community of LA City and LA County.
The Honorable Dennis Zine live with us on the line here, former LA City Council member and longtime member of the Los Angeles Police Department, and repeating the top story on a vote of 4-0 today with one abstention. The LA County Board of Supervisors putting in motion a plan to strip more than $300 million a year in taxpayer dollars from the LA Homeless Services Authority, known as LAHSA. And by the way, this happened. The supervisors voted unanimously with seizing control of the taxpayer money being used to fight the homeless crisis. After being urged not to by LA Mayor Karen Bass, several LA City Council members dramatically left their city council meeting, Dennis Zine, today to march over to the Hahn Hall of Administration there down the street. And they're all at the city there. Those who participated in that walkout raised concerns that services could be disrupted and question if the new approach would be better. So along the lines of what you just said, do you think the city of L.A. and the county are now going to be locking horns over this, and what's that going to look like?
Well, they're going to lock horns, but I think Judge Carter has finally had it, and to see the city splitting from the county, I will tell you from my personal perspective, as a resident, a taxpayer, member of law enforcement, elected official, etc., it's not working. But again, it's not millions, it is billions upon billions upon billions. And then now the city wants to increase taxes. They want to put a bond measure so we can build fire stations and hire firefighters and get fire equipment because of the tragedy that occurred in the Pacific Palisades. So there's going to be another measure coming forward, a bond measure to raise millions upon millions of dollars. Surely we need fire stations. Surely we need to have protection. But the fact is these voters are fed up. And it just gets worse and worse and worse. This is a classic example. You're going to see the city and the county coming to a warpath now because the city wants to maintain LAHSA, which is a joke, and the county says we've had enough. And people need to understand, quit voting for more taxes. You're just throwing the money down the drain. You're not seeing a positive result at all.
Intense scrutiny focused on how government money is being spent to deal with the homeless. Other programs that are privately funded get much better results and have very high ratings from a Charity Navigator and so forth, something we, of course, focus quite a bit on this program, Dennis Zine. I wish we had more time, but you'll have more time on the next soapbox, and certainly appreciate your reacting to the breaking news here this afternoon. A dramatic development today in the homeless crisis here in Los Angeles. The LA County supervisors have decided to stop sending hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars each year to LAHSA. A stinging admission by elected officials that the region's longstanding approach to homelessness has failed, essentially, as LAist and others are reporting. The vote 4-0 today at the Hahn Hall of Administration. Dennis Zine, thank you very much for coming to the line. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang, and I'll be back with more at 4 tomorrow afternoon, right here on Mottek On Money and 790 KBC.
The Sean Ryan Show Peak Points. Get timeless inspiration from the very best of the Sean Ryan Show.
What do you think of working with the SEALs?
We went out every night going after bad guys. I was humbled.
There was no going back home.
I would be in another room crying because I was afraid to go to sleep because of what was coming for me in the middle of the night.
How long did it take you to be able to talk about it?
A long time. But I realized my experiences may help other people too.
The men like yourself are considered legends in the community.
You're right.
The Sean Ryan Show Peak Points. Follow and listen on your favorite platform.